Thank you very much. So our moderator, Ms. Ijoma Ndukwe, Anchor BBC Africa, please step up here now. And also to stand in for the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. I'd like to welcome Mr. Gabriel Aduda, Permanent Secretary. I welcome you, my brother. Other members of the panel include Dr. Husseini Abdul, Country Director, Plan International, Nigeria. Ms. Yemi Adamalekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, Nigeria. Ms. Cynthia Mbamalu, Program Manager, Yaga Africa. And Mr. Edaton Ojo, Executive Director, the Media Rights Agenda. And so, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before Ijoma takes over, let me invite here Mr. Gabriel Aduda, Permanent Secretary, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, for his opening remarks, and then... Okay, you're doing it from there? Okay.
Citizens access to participating in governance. What we have tried to do in this administration is to create an interactive portal on e-participation and e-participation system that aims to provide access to Nigerians such that they can be able to reach government for whatever form of either to seek for information, to make complaints, or to even give ideas to government in whatever sectors or fields that they feel that they have value to add to the system of governance. This system is anchored on an existing government information and communication technology infrastructure, basically relying on voice and data communication networks. Indeed, it was launched in May 2018, and it is so simple that once you know how to use an email or send a text message, all you need to do is to get on either the OSGF website and then go in from there to e-participation portal, or you go directly to the e-participation.gov, that is .gov.ng portal, and that gives you access. There you're able to feed in whatever ministry, department, or agency of government that you want to reach out to, and then you go ahead to do whatever it is, either whatever sort, or to put in a suggestion on what you think should be done, or give an opinion on a program or policy of government. I want to discuss that project very quickly before we open up the floor. Now, project status so far, since launch in May 2018, we have received a few complaints, even though we're still working on the system and improving it, but I think we've gotten to that stage now where the system is ready for participation from all and sundry. The process that we have put in place helps us to respond aptly and quickly and promptly to requests or whatever it is we receive from the public. And to deal with this issue, the webmasters have been trained. As at the initial, we had about 25 of them, and the platform enables all the various forms of social media that you could use to reach us on that. And in the pilot phase, 24 out of 310 ministries, departments, and agencies of government were selected as nodal offices. This was deliberate because we needed to test run to see how it works before opening up to the larger house. Going forward, or where we want to be, we recognize the role that technology can play in bridging the gulf or the space between citizens and government. And what we have tried to do is to see if we can limit that space or break the us and them dichotomy where the average Nigerian looks at himself as a Nigerian and looks at government as government on the other side. And then there isn't oftentimes a point of meeting between the two, except for those perhaps that have one or two dealings with government in areas of contracts or what have you. We are now saying no, you can have a say in how things are done. So the Office of the Secretary to Government that houses that portal is working closely with the leadership of various ministries, departments, and agencies of government to increase the number of nodal officers that have been trained and then train more, such that each of the MDDAs actually has more like a unit within it that helps to provide prompt service as required. We have rolled out already, and we are hoping to cover the whole of that. Now, it is important just to mention that in as much as some might not think so, but the administration actually sees citizen participation as very important, and that is why we wholly embrace the Open Government Partnership Forum to see how we can together work to achieve an inclusive government where citizens are actually able to participate in governance. But there is a lot that still needs to be done in creating awareness and getting Nigerians to actually reach out and make use of these portals, make use of this system and processes that have been put in place for them to be part of governance. So we're calling on Nigerians, even through this forum, to try to reach out. Like I said earlier, you can go either directly from the office or the website of the Office of the Secretary to Government, which is osgf.gov.ng, or you go directly to e-participation on e-participation.gov.ng. Like I said, we'll just address the issues as they come. So I will, with your kind permission, hand over to the moderator and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gabriel. Now, I just want to put out a question to the audience. And anyone who's watching, as we live stream this conversation, can join in. You just need to go to Twitter and send us a question on hashtag NAS24, hashtag citizens participation. So to the audience, has anyone heard of this portal? And is this a platform that you would use, and if so, why? And my colleague Chisholm, she's out there now, and she'll take any questions anyone has about the portal and what their views are on what we've just heard.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Chisholm. This is by show of hands. If you've ever heard of this portal, by show of hands, has anyone heard of this portal? Anyone? Okay, but second question, is this a portal that you would use? Anyone? Yes. Can you tell us why, please?
My name is Adia Arabi. I work with Bureau of Public Service Reforms. I have come across the portal. It's working. I have sent questions, though we belong to the same side, the government side. I've sent questions. I received no response. I want to add in support of what the Permanent Secretary has said. In addition to that, the Secretary to the government has given the Bureau of Public Service Reforms approval to set up a scorecard monitoring mechanism to measure performance of MDAs against their websites. And specific questions and requirements have been, criteria have been given, so that through that we'll be able to see how active our websites are, how interactive the websites are, and specifically there is a column on freedom of information portal, electronic, that is required on all government websites. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And has anyone outside of the government has anyone outside of the government heard of this portal? And would anyone outside of the government use it? Anyone? Interesting.
Okay, so I'd like to get the thoughts of some of our panelists now, especially those of you who have strong grassroots ties. I'll start with you, Dr. Abdu. How effective do you think a platform like this could be for the people that you deal with in your work every day?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's a good idea that the government recognized the need for citizens' participation in governance. And I think it's quite encouraging that also we've decided to use digital platform to get this access across citizens and get to hear their views. But the challenge is that, one, I don't think that there is enough publicity around that. From where I sit, I'm a very active member of the Nigerian civil society, and I've not been engaged on this, and I know several other people. Second, on the digital platform, it's encouraging. We can't discourage that. We should continue with it, but we need to recognize that only about 41% of the population actually have access to internet. And of that 41%, less than 15% actually have access to broadband access. And that is quite limiting. And so a substantial number of Nigerians can access the internet only through the GSM. And the platform, I just did a quick check on the platforms now, which requires you to have an email address and with a password for you to be able to log in. It's not social enough, and so you to have a digital platform that people can freely engage is that you must make it social. It must be a one-touch thing, considering our literacy level in the country, considering the difficulty in our access to internet facilities and all that, and we must be designed in a manner that it doesn't take enough more of your data. Going through the process of logging in and all that is data consuming, and for poorer communities to be able to actively engage in this, it will be difficult. But on my own major distinction is that it's encouraging that the government has decided to have it. What we need to do is to engage it more, is to raise the necessary questions and get a way of socializing the entire process.
Okay, so that's some food for thought. Yemi, what's your take on this?
Thank you. I also hadn't heard about it until sort of this information around this panel was shared. And I think, as Mr. Abdu said, a platform that requires citizens to have internet access, email address, to be able to engage government when there are already government structures that can be leveraged. So it makes, I mean, my point would be, why was this thought the best solution for citizens to engage government? We have 774 local governments. National Orientation Agency has an office in each of those local governments. I'm not quite sure if this platform is working with NOA in terms of engagement. The three of us that sit on this panel are quite active members of Nigeria's civil sector. None of us had heard of the platform. So in terms of publicity, I guess publicity might speak to adverts and jingles, which would be the way government normally educates the public around what it's doing. But more about engagement. Who's your audience? How are you trying to get them to use it? And really, ultimately, if it's about citizens, the distance between citizens and government, it's housed by the Secretary to the federal government of Nigeria. The local government is your smallest sort of administrative unit. I would have thought that emphasis would be placed on that. So you've passed local government, you've passed state government, you now house a portal in the federal government, so for people to send ideas on a platform that has no advertising support, no engagement with civil society, no engagement with religious and traditional institutions. So my question is really, was it designed to work?
Cynthia, what would you say, what tools do you think could help to bridge the gap between citizens and public institutions?
Okay.
So I'll just repeat that.
Yeah.
So I would just like to bring in, and of course, Yemi, you can add to that as well. What tools do you think we need to bridge the gap between citizens and public institutions?
Well, I think first is looking at the model of engagement. Because one, from government side, you can't want to engage citizens if you're not even sure what the citizens need or what the people need. It's almost like in business. You don't have, it's good to have a brilliant idea, but if you don't have the market for it, it's just an idea that you have. And that is what it is when it comes to engagement. Now, the platform, for one, like they've said, it's a good idea. But what solution does it seek to meet or to address, or what does it bring extra from what we've had before? And what do we need to do? Now, bridging the gap between the citizens and the government it's something that needs to we need to deploy intentional steps. And like we've said, governance it's not about those at the center. It's not just about those that work within a sector. It's about meeting the needs of the people at the different levels of government, from both the local, the state, and the national or the federal level. And that is where we've always had a challenge. That usually whenever you hear from the government, oh, we're going to engage citizens, it's always limited to reaching out to a very minute percentage of our population, and we never get results. And what we need to do is, for every engagement, it needs to be citizens-driven, meaning that before any innovation, before any technological solution is preferred or is installed or is made public, you need to get citizens' input on that. You need to also ensure that there is a balance between online and offline engagement, because working in the civil society space, I would be lying to myself if I say all I want to do is engage on social media, because we have the communities that we need to engage. And it begins with also looking for how to connect the offline community with the online community. Then the youth population. And I think as a young person, I would want to speak from the fact that young people occupy about 60% of the population. So that's a large chunk. And if you'd want to have a platform like this, You cannot do that without getting the youth input, because this is the population that matter. They are the present and the tomorrow, right? Meaning that every idea, every policy or legislation, whatever decisions the government needs to take, the voices of young people need to be represented. So even in the engagement, how well have you even engaged the student communities? How well have you even gone to the youth that are in the unconventional sectors, working in clusters, right? How well have you engaged the middle-class youth, the elite youth, who work the white-collar job or in the private sector, and even within the government sector? So we have a platform like this. I can take a bet that if you do a survey within the ministry, departments, and agencies, they wouldn't even know of its existence. So the question is, our model of engagement, do we design in such a way that it's inclusive and it's also it's supposed to respond to questions or issues raised? Because if you go on the platform, you're supposed to put up an MDA you want to either have an idea to share or ask a question. So even within the MDAs, do they even know this platform exists? And who are those responsible for providing response? Because communication is a two-way thing, right? It's not something that comes from one angle. And that is also another question we need to look at. That each time we think of engaging the people, our first question should be, who are my people and how do I want to reach these people? Because if we come up with an idea that is alien to the people, they would never jump on it. I can bet that we can tweet about this platform, share the link, and you would not get retweets. Young people would just say, oh, government have come again. And then you could have something trending from that, because they wouldn't even see the need, meaning this may not even be the pressing need when it comes to engaging the people. So that fundamental question on when we want to engage, what is our model of engagement? Is it inclusive? Is it open? Does it respond to present needs? And will it take into consideration every aspect of the society? Even the women, how do we even ensure that you have more women that want to use that? You have young people that want to use that. Persons with disability, how does this even, how can this engage this community or this social category of persons with disability? Because that is the only way you can achieve results or even create impact with such a platform, if truly we want to engage citizens. But what is important is, yes, there's a need to engage citizens. This is the generation of engaging citizens. We can't overemphasize that. And there is no democracy even if the institutions don't imbibe the principles of inclusion, transparency, and even responsiveness and accountability, because you also need to be sure that such a platform, there is someone at the back end who you'd hold responsible for either not even responding to questions asked.
Okay, let's shift gears for a second. Did you want to respond to that? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me thank all the panelists for your kind observations. But I think in as much as we are still kicking out in trying to reach out to Nigerians, I think one of the things we need to also take to heart is that the average Nigerian is very skeptical of government. And there is nothing you do. In fact, even when you provide these things, a number of them don't reach out to them. A very good example is Servicom, for example. One of the basic things why Servicom was set up was to be able to provide service to Nigerians, to enhance or give you access to government in such a way that you're able to either report or insist until you're served. In fact, to improve service of provision of governance to the Nigerian people. But unfortunately, you realize that go to virtually every ministry, department, and agency of government that has a Servicom desk and ask them, how many people have approached you with either request for information? Now, the Freedom of Information Act is a different thing altogether, and that oftentimes is done on a corporate basis because you come either as an NGO or whatever, but here we're trying to see how we can actually look at that within the confines of even the ordinary citizen, the average Nigerian, walking up to a government entity to say, look, I need information on X, Y, Z. Now, oftentimes you realize that this information is available, but hardly do Nigerians come forward to make requests. I have just shown you this portal, and I just opened it now. And if you go to the very first page, if you just put in eparticipation.gov.ng and you go to, I think, need to know, you will see a little bit of statistics there. There is nothing hidden. You will see that a few requests have been made. You will see that a few complaints have been made. And why we've made that is such that as it grows, it is open to Nigerians to see. Now, is that the only platform for engagement? Absolutely no. But it is one of the platforms. Someone talked about National Orientation Agency. We have tried to engage National Orientation Agency on several fronts, but you and I know that oftentimes these local governments are little more than just a meeting joint for others. And then how have we tried to get this down to states and local governments? One of the things we did in December 2017 was to put together a forum called the SGF/SSG's Forum. That is Office of the Secretary to Government of the Federation and Secretaries of State Governments. And we meet quarterly to apprise government policies and programs and how they apply to states. This was not on ground before now. We just started that last year because we realized that government plans, strategies, and all that, ERGP as a strategy, for example, needs to be cascaded down. And so we began to ask ourselves, how do we get the states to participate, to take part? Because oftentimes the theater of implementation will not be hanging there at the federal level. They happen at the state levels and right down to local government levels. And as such, we decided, okay, let's hold this quarterly forum that brings these people out who are more like the backbones of their various governments, because you will agree with me that the Office of the Secretary to Government is like the Secretariat to the Presidency, to the Vice President and all. And the same thing at the state level. That is what the Office of the SSG, that is the Secretary to State Government, is supposed to be. And so we started that, and we have looked over time at various government interventions. But in order not to get off track, for us to pay attention to what we're trying to do, you see, what we have done is to look at just one of the entities. Of course, we have all portals. We are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and you realize that oftentimes, if you even go to our pages now, what you see is mostly us giving out information and we hardly get feedback. Recently, we celebrated the 58th independence anniversary, and we decided that for the first time, we're going to reach out to young men and women in Nigeria. And the first thing I did when we sat with the committee was to say, look, if we go out to them and we say the government of Nigeria invites young men and women to this event, trust me, nobody will come. Because of the level of apathy and skepticism within the system. So what we did was to target the FAM Festival, Film, Art, and Music Festival. Perhaps some of you here were there in Abuja. We gathered close to 4,000 young men and women. To ensure that we got the right persons, what we did was to say, okay, pay a gate fee of 2,000 so we don't just have riffraffs in there. And if you come with your voter's card, you pay just 1,000 naira. So many came and presented their voter's cards. They paid a gate fee of 1,000 naira, just at Harrow Park here. And we were able to, for the first time, gather this number of people, but what we did was not to give it a government face, even though it was 100% government-sponsored. Okay? So what we did was to bring the young men and women together, and for the first time, I realized that even the youth intervention programs of government that have been put in place either over these 3 years or even before now, more than half of them were not aware. So what did we do? We printed pamphlets, okay, carrying about 10 to 12 different programs of government that were targeted at the youth, with the addresses, the websites, and everything, and then we gave out young men and women as they gathered there. Why am I taking us there? This also is an attempt on the part of government to say, look, young men and women, it is not an us and them thing. You're part of us, and we need to bridge that divide. And what the beauty of it is that we had quite a number of testimonials of those that have gotten grants or have gotten some small loans or some soft loans and all that, and they were now doing very well in business. But coming back here, you realize that except the citizen wakes up to it, we need to ask questions. Yes, we may not have been fully out there kind of selling what we're doing in government, whereby you also know that we have our limitations, especially in the area of budgeting and all. Sometimes ability to effectively go out is hampered. But where we have an eager population, an eager set of people that want to know. The truth of the matter is that the information is out there. We have tried to put it out to the best that we can for now. We are not saying all avenues have been exhausted, but I think government should be given the kudos for the fact that these platforms have been created. Go to Servicom, ask them, how many requests have you received within a year? You will be shocked that Nigerians are not using the services that have been provided. The same thing with the portal. We only started in May. Of course, we will give it time to grow and perhaps still work at getting Nigerians to know that it exists, and then perhaps create that awareness for them to effectively engage, which is what we really want to do. But that also will take time. But above all, I think there is a need to work on the mind and the psyche of the average Nigerian, where you oftentimes will just think government is against us. The truth of the matter is this, that no matter what you have, in the first place you put them there, you have a responsibility, okay? And they have a responsibility to you. But when you do not come knocking for what is yours, nobody throws it at you. I think I'll hang there for now.
Okay, I just want to shift gears for a moment, and I want to ask this question, and which I'd like you to answer as well. To what extent do you think that the average citizen is even aware or understands their rights?
Interesting question. The truth of the matter is, how many Nigerians, I did a poll recently where we had a number of young people gathered, and I asked, how many of you here have actually taken time to even read the Nigerian Constitution? You'll be shocked that except for the lawyer amongst us, the others have not even taken time to bother about the provisions of the Constitution. So how do you get to know your rights when you're not even bothered about knowing what those rights are? So a lot of times what people do is you shout and shout and shout by bits and piecemeal information you get from left and right. But do we really have people that actually take time? Outside of the, let me carefully use the word activists. Because what the activists and the civil society end does is they take their time to actually dig out these things that helps them to now want to hold government accountable. As a young man and woman, for you to actually get to know what is yours, if you haven't been taught, unfortunately, like I know that civicism is being reintroduced into our schools, it wasn't done before, or it was even taken out, as you are aware. Okay? So there is a huge responsibility, not only on the individual to want to know what belongs to them, but also for the educational system to begin to teach the right stuff. We need to put it in them. We need to teach it out there. I agree that there is a lapse there, but I think over and above that, as an average young man and woman, it is your duty to know what is due you.
So there's clearly a role that education has to play here.
Absolutely.
Yemi, can I get your take on this about, what we need to do to get the average citizen aware of what their rights are and what they should be demanding?
There's so much was going through my head as my colleague was speaking, and I'm glad where you landed around the role of education. And, the government controls the curriculum. So that says a lot, that we recognize that people don't know what's due to them. And if we tie it as, we're talking about governance and citizens' participation, it's very hard if you don't know what belongs to you. So you are born into Nigeria, this is what you see. And so you grow up thinking that this is how government works. And it also ties to your point about trust. Can you blame Nigerians for not trusting government? Because over the years, what we've seen is a failure of government to deliver. Now, people run for office, and you put yourself forward with promises. I will give light, I will give water, I will give all of this, and then they don't.
Politicians, not me.
I said people. I didn't say you, but they run. I didn't say you. I said people run for office, and they run to serve. They say they're going. They say actually they use the words like rule. Rule, I think, is the one I like the most, which doesn't say anything about service. Leadership and public sector work is service. So you put yourself forward, make all these promises, over and over again, citizens are disappointed. So you can't blame them for not trusting government, because everything you say you're going to do, you don't do. Now, tying that to what you're saying about the different platforms, yes, but it is also government's role to tie those things together. So if you had come and talked about the portal and then talked about A and B and C and D and E, and this is how all of that are tied together in government's attempt to not only educate Nigerians about their rights and then engage them in ensuring that those rights or those services get delivered to them, then it shows a bit more of a holistic plan. And that speaks to Cynthia's point. Because if you are not dealing with the population that you have, which does include riffraffs, I'm sorry, the uneducated members of Nigeria are citizens of Nigeria, they are Nigerians. Your educated elite are Nigerians, your persons with disabilities are Nigerians. So the whole gamut that we have as fellow citizens in this country make up the Nigeria that we have. So if a government agency wants to address issues of engaging and citizens' participation and responsiveness, you need to tailor your solution to address everybody and meet them where they are. So any government program at a national level that doesn't do that, again, goes back to my point, was it really designed to work? So yes, the portal is one bit of it, but it has to be a bit that's part of a larger plan that's aimed to achieve a purpose or solve a problem. Now lastly, the SGF SSG forum, I think is a fantastic innovation, and I really hope that beyond the discussions, they're actually able to work together to deliver. But Servicom, I've tried to use Servicom, I would say probably 2 or 3 times. Not once have they gotten back to me. Not once. Now, it goes back again to this issue of trust. Why would I then go back if they have not done what they were set up to do? So over the years, what then happens is people realize that they don't work and they don't bother. Then people don't engage. Then people go to church and mosque and we pray and we stop interacting with government agencies because we don't expect them to work. Now, tying to Cynthia's point, and which is sometimes why the conversation is around, is government really interested in citizens engaging? Because if government spent a lot more time, rather than creating fancy portals and adverts and all sorts, and actually spent time doing 2 things. 1, actually delivering. A Nigerian doesn't need to tell you that they need water. They need access to quality education. They need roads that function, they need light, they need healthcare they can pay for. No Nigerian needs to tell you that. Basic social services, number 1. Number 2, educate, I'll change my mind, 3 things. So 1, the basic social services are basic. Nobody needs to tell you that. Number 2, the government institutions that already exist, we don't need to add anything to them. Let them just work. Let the people just show up in time at work at 9 a.m. You get to the office, people are there, they take your complaints, they don't ask you for money, let them just work. And then thirdly, invest in rebuilding our education system. It is broken. I'm a proud product of the University of Ife. My parents were academics, I grew up there. And it was a very small town, but I went to a public school. I went to Federal Government Girls College, Akure, for a few years. So I'm a proud product of Nigeria's public school. But as I am now, don't have children, I wouldn't send my child to any. You can't pay me enough to send them to those schools. So if government wants to help citizens engage, let's invest in our broken education sector and add to that teaching citizens what their rights are so that they know that, look, EIE has a radio program, 19 states across the country. Called Office of the Citizen. By the way, you should have gotten a green passport, everybody in the hall, and the 2 first pages talks about your rights and responsibilities as a citizen. So without reading the Constitution, at least you have a summarized version. But it's an important thing to teach. A lot of citizens don't have. So on radio, we find out, as you said, rightly said, they don't know what their rights and responsibilities are. Number 2, the way the radio program is structured, it's called Office of the Citizen. So we don't want people to call to just rant, as you said. So when you call us and say you have a problem, we say, okay, the problem you've described is the role of your local government chairman. Your local government chairman is Hussein Abdu, and his number is 080, blah, blah, blah. Call him. They're like, We're like, yes, call him. So I can call him. Yes, he works for you. So it's ongoing every day, and to your point about citizens not understanding. So if government invested more in letting citizens know that, yes, Hussein Abudu works for you, call him. I remember when Sahara Reporters, for example, released the numbers of the National Assembly members, and the uproar. How could you make our numbers public? Da, 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 da. Well, you don't have a constituency office. You don't have numbers of staff that people can call. You don't have office hours. You are elected to work for me. So if I get your personal number, I will share it. Oh, sorry, one last thing I wanted to say, sorry. Sorry, just one last thing I wanted to say, sorry. Also, in terms of, I mean, your point about Servicom and the other portals is sharing success stories. I think it also builds trust. If citizens know that, oh, this thing actually does work. I sent in a complaint, somebody responded to me, and there was a solution. And if that happens, sharing that so people do begin to build trust back that, okay, this engagement actually yields results.
Dr. Abdu, I'd like to bring you in here because your organization, Plan Nigeria, focuses on education. Oh. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you did a very excellent analysis of this. And for me, when I hear government says, oh, citizens are apathetic and are not engaging, nothing can be further from the truth. Nigerians are very, very active people. You need to get to our street and get the passion, the feel of Nigerians engaging and asking questions. The difference is actually that Nigerians have learned to engage in the informal setting than the formal setting because of the failure of the formal setting. And you see this in governance, you see this in business. We have a lot of informal sector because the formal sector is not accommodating. And people have to create their own platform and their own system to run their own businesses for their own survivals. The same thing is happening in governance. People are running their parallel institutions to respond to their own immediate issues and concerns. Government don't deliver, no water, they make every extreme effort to get their own water. There is no electricity, they do everything possible to provide their own alternative. Because they have realized that there is no point complaining, there is no point having this conversation because the system is unaccountable. And when the system remains unaccountable and people get tired of demanding for accountability, they lose it. And that's the context we have found ourselves. And that is the reasons why institutions, systems are not working. Take Servicom. A lot of us, look, when Servicom came up, and I was part of those initial conversations on Servicom, and look, it was very clear. It was a very technicist thing that somebody just came up with an idea, said, brilliant idea, it works in another country, it will work here, set up, bring civil servants untrained, make them to man those Servicom centers, terribly rude and unaccountable. You get to a place, it's actually like you are bothering them. And Nigerians don't do things like that. So once it didn't work, they walked away from it. They totally walked away from it. And this is what I was saying with different kinds of institutions that government set up. And you see this attitude, where the government cutting corners to get things done. Look, if you drive around Abuja, if you see a police checkpoint, it's in one corner. It's hiding, so that you just bump at them and then they stop you. Because they knew that once they take the right, when they are publicly faced, nobody will pass through that road. The VIO is hiding in one corner to do its work. The road safety people are hiding in one corner to do their work. The government is mobilizing citizens by pretending that it is not government that is doing the mobilization. Because nobody will go. So there is that element that people have actually lost it. And I think that the government should be very concerned that there's people are losing it. It should be very concerned. You can't get that. And when you get to that situation, you just need to understand that and then begin to tone down those technicians things, become more accountable, let the system become more value-based. And if you do that, people will get to understand, train staff, and ensure that the right people are actually doing the right thing. Look, listen to our radios and get the level of conversation taking place at the level of in those radios. There is one called Berekati Family. Our drivers every morning, they tune to those things, go to the market. People are clustering on radio stations to listen to Berekati Radio because it speaks their language. It talks to their issues. It mainstreams their concerns. They get the right people, call them, and they could call the Commissioner of Police and say, Commissioner of Police, there is this issue, can you come and respond to it? And that helps. So for me, there are a lot of other things that different organizations are doing outside that can be very helpful to the government, but it is very, very, very concerning. The level of cynicism, the level of pessimism is deep but it is not apathy, because Nigerians are very, very deep and they are very, very active. Thank you.
So we're just going to hand over to the audience now and get your questions, if any of you have questions for the panel. And I just want to remind you, anyone who's watching as we live stream, if you would like to join the conversation, you can just go to Twitter and send us a message. You send it to NES24 #citizens participation. So I'll hand over to my colleague Chisholm.
Thank you, everybody. This is that time we want you to participate. I've seen hands up already, but just before we do that, we do have something we'd like to talk about, something we'd like you to hear about, and Dr. Tayo Adeloju is already has his hands up, so he will tell us about the Open Government Partnership. What is this about?
So the first thing is to thank EIE for animating the Office of the Citizen. Thank you, and Your Excellencies, Office of the Citizens. It is an important point to note that we cannot create sustainable development without the co-creation of private sector, civil society, and government. It is a co-creation. Now, the Open Government Partnership is a global alliance against corruption signed by President Buhari to deal with the openness and transparency of government in 2015. When it was being constituted, the world told us it will only work if it had equal participation and representation of civil society. So we have 40 members of civil society present that participate with 40 members of government in co-creating specific reforms. And let me go quickly to some of them. For example, in open budgeting, which is led by the Ministry of Budget and National Planning in the public sector, or led by Budget, a civil society entity in the private sector, we improved the transparency of the budget process. We saw budgets become simplified in a form that Nigerians could digest and understand. And then Track.ng, which is a civil society platform that is mandated and signed off government, is tracking the implementation of budget. On, for example, freedom of access to information, we have at least 75% of our requests for information, okay, have been met by government, and we're tracking that also. And this is civil society and non-state actors tracking that also. So we have been responsible. We are in Abuja, civil society, and across the country, tracking, monitoring, and engaging. So there is a responsible citizen cluster and community in Nigeria. Okay, and we are finding in some cases partners in government. For example, in budget, when we said to the budget ministry we needed a citizen budget that citizens could understand, we got a yes on that, and we moved on that. Now, at subnational, we are seeing state governments also respond. For example, I was saying in Kaduna, we have an OGP in Kaduna that is a vibrant set of civil society actors acting. They are the ones that pushed and created what we call the ears and eyes in partnership with government, where citizens go and score projects and hold government accountable. So I think it's wrong to sit in the room and presume that there is not a broad citizen engagement, and also that there is not a robust public sector partnering side. What we need, honestly, is to deepen the participation. And I want to offer 4 potential ways to do that. The first is to deepen access to information. And the DG of Bureau of Public Service Reforms raised a big issue. Historically, when you went to our institutional websites, there was no information there. That was a very common complaint in Nigeria. So I think the first concern was, how do we enable the information citizens need to be available without asking? So the DG BPSR is charged with the responsibility of tracking that information is available. And so you can hold him accountable to measure that. And we do hold him accountable. We ask him when we don't see data that citizens should statutorily see to make that available. The other thing we've asked is that we want to see the spend of government as it is happening. So for example, we are pushing for specific laws. We just got FEC to approve that as government is actually spending, not not just releases, spending. We can see those spends, track and hold government to account. There is an active side to this conversation where civil society must do their bit and government must do their bit. So in closing, to a great extent, the OGP, what it has done to date is move the conversation on fiscal transparency, on tax transparency, on ease of doing business, okay, by creating a platform that can transcend one government because it is owned not just by the public sector, it's owned by civil society. And we are cultivating these civil society actors across the country. The big question is, can we have more participation? Can we have more citizens involved? Can we have more information where people can act and deliver the results that are needed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is a very distinguished audience. So I'm just going to set a few ground rules. So we just have about 45 minutes to take questions, comments, but we need to be precise, we need to be straightforward. It has to be one question because we want to get to as many people as possible. So please keep it brief. If you want to make a statement, very brief. You want to ask a question, straight to the point, one, so we can get to as many people as possible. So I see so many hands up. Thank you for participating. This is exactly what we're talking about.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Bala Abdullahi Kutu. I must commend the operators or the initiators. My statement is this, or question. We know of 911 elsewhere that is a connection between the police and the citizen. And I will appreciate if you also come up with similar number so that whenever a citizen is in a problem, he will be able to call. And then secondly, we also, okay.
Thank you very much. Anyone to respond? Do we have a response?
Sorry?
Okay. Who's next? Thank you.
My question is to the government official.
Okay.
I'm just curious if you can give us one example of an outcome that has come out of this portal. So not how many people are using it or have registered, but one example of a suggestion or an engagement that a citizen made and that you did something about it and what the outcome was. And the reason why I say this is that you're not going to get the everyday person to use your portal if you don't show us the outcome. If you just tell us all to register and just talk, we already have many avenues to talk. I listen to the radio, to EIE's session on the radio. So just curious if you can give us an example of an actual outcome and something you addressed.
Fortunately, I think we have received quite a number of requests, like I said, not necessarily on the portal, but on the portal, if you go to where I just gave you, you will see the numbers. That is why I said it's as transparent as that. And as the numbers grow, you see them. So it is not the issue of being told it was, it wasn't. As you feed in, it counts. Yes, we have received requests, especially concerning, like you all know, oftentimes the policies of government. But a specific one I will want to mention was concerning the executive orders, where we needed to give a clarification to someone that wanted that, especially on default approvals. Because I believe that quite a number of us still don't know that Executive Order 001 is also supposed to help us engage government better. And that even comes along with penalties where government does not serve you, whereby the service charter is expected to give specific number of days. I think the suggestion was 14 days. That if you make a request to government for a particular thing, and after 14 days, or whatever that particular service charter of that MDA says, you do not receive a request, that request is as good as approved. And if you go ahead and do what you were supposed to do, and it is in an invariance or whatever, then whichever officer received that request from you is liable and can be punished for not getting back to you within those number of days. So I think as much as it sounds like government, it's on its own and the people are here. I want to thank the young man that just spoke to us about OGP and all that. We could go ahead to actually give you quite a number of examples of these engagements that are actually working, especially in trying to entrench open governance. So I am one of those that believe that the civil societies actually just need to be, or the citizenry needs to be just a bit more engaging. It doesn't mean that there isn't any form of engagement at all. If anybody is here from BITAN, BITAN is Budget Transparency and Advocacy Network in Cross River State. When we set up that, it became one of the very best that we had in the States. And what was the intent of that? To have government participation in the budget system at the state level. And it got so good that after the first year that was run, the moment the budget document is passed by the state executive to the state assembly, a copy is made available to the civil society organizations to bring in their input to the assembly. And then forums are created on sectors, health, education, water, name it, all aimed at having a contribution from the citizenry. So to a large extent, I don't think that the engagement is as bad as some of us say it. But I want to agree with Tayo that what we need to do is to increase that. And also, these provisions are there. The citizenry needs to take advantage.
Okay, let's take some more audience questions.
Thank you.
Great. As a citizen, I want to commend the Office of the Secretary of the Federal Government for this initiative. And as with many other initiatives, we need to have more engagement with the citizenry. I am the President General of the Unity Schools Old Students Association, a coalition of over 1 million educated Nigerians, a target audience for which you would want to engage primarily. One of them is Yemi, who is sitting right next to you, a product, an investment of the federal government. You would want to use this platform, you would want to use the USOSA alumni coalition to better educate Nigerians. I say education of what's going on in government is key. So we pledge support for this, and I want to look forward to better engagement with the alumni coalition. Nigeria has invested in the federal schools already. It's time for Nigeria to use its investment and engage better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We still have more questions. Thank you.
My name is because we have to do I just want a clarification on an idea that's beginning to form in my mind from your presentation. And it has to do with the social contract between government and citizens. And I would like for you to help disabuse my mind concerning the us and them image that is forming by asking you to clarify and help us identify those that may be termed riffraffs for purposes of social stratification. Thank you.
Please let me address that very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, please get this. You see, what we tried to do at that particular, and please forgive my using the word riffraff. If you, no, hang on. If you think, I didn't mean to use it in a derogatory sense. What we actually aimed at was to reach a particular cache of young men and women, especially what we targeted at were those of them that were either graduates or that were in one form of business or the other. So we had a class and we tried to reach out to those around there that could actually work towards accessing those intervention programs. Because most of them are made available not for people that are still in schools or people that perhaps will not be able to meet up with some level of requirements for those things. So please, I want to quickly and say it here that it wasn't meant in a derogatory sense, and if you think so, I withdraw it. But what I meant was we needed people that could actually participate in those programs, that had something that will meet the prerequisites for that. And that was why we said, look, for us to do that, if we leave it open, it will attract anybody. But if we now put a price to it, because Nigerians value what they spend money for. I mean, what is 1,000 naira? What is 2,000 naira? Okay? And at the end of the day, we said, hello? No. Please, let us, hang on. Let us look at it in the concept. Let us look at it in the context. I agree. Please, I am on your side. Hang on. I am on your side. Hello? No.
Absolutely unacceptable.
I'm making reference to
No. Please. It's unacceptable, sir. You cannot say that from a government official that what is 1,000, what is 2,000 naira. No. The majority of your population, Nigeria has the largest, but in the context of the Nigeria that we live in, Nigeria has the highest number of people living in poverty. We can't run away from these issues, please.
Okay, can I respond to that? Please let us understand this. I was making a submission in the context. So let's not take it out of context. Let's not take it out of context. Okay, please, let's not take this out of context. I'm making a submission within a context of a program that was designed and targeted at a particular set of Nigerians. It wasn't targeted at everyone. So please understand my submission within the context, not outside the context. Because we wanted a particular cache of people that government have made these provisions to, and we wanted them to be made aware and to be able to reach out and benefit from these issues. So please let us understand that I am not speaking to generality. I am speaking within the context of the specific program that I was referring to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it would be good if we could take some questions for some of the other panelists as well.
All right, I would rather take this feedback and not necessarily to defend the government. So let's try and approach it from a private sector mentality perspective. If a typical private sector is trying to communicate a message to the audience, to the people, they have ways of going about it. So one of the most popular websites I got out today is Job Seeker, for example. It is surprising the number of you that will normally subscribe to Job Seeker website today. So if you want to consume technology, make it very simple. Don't complicate it. I cannot go to a portal and start filling in a lot of information. So number one, let's create an application that is user-friendly. Number two, create a buzz around it. Three, engage in search engine optimization, whereby people actually be directed to go to the application of the portal as case is P. In that case, a lot of people get engaged. And like the speaker was saying, there are different segments of people you want to reach out to. Not everybody is available online. So when you have an interactive platform where different segments of people actually go, it becomes a lot easier. So what I'm saying is, let's engage search engine optimization to be able to kill because around what you're doing. Because we're doing a lot and we don't know how much you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please let's remember to keep it brief. So many people want to ask questions. So please keep it brief.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to make an input. I'm a retired federal government assistant. My question is about to know why this initiative has not been channeled through an existing agency whose functions are quite completely coincide with what you're doing. We know that one of the problems we have is that there is a huge overhead, a top-heavy problem in the structure of governance. And this is why the increase in oil revenue is not impacting us. We are using so much to pay for salary. I'm talking about the national orientation agencies. Why do we have to continue to duplicate and create new agencies and new initiatives when there are agencies already in existence which are going forward? We are not using the NOA in the fight for corruption. We're not using it adequately in so many other ways, and now we are trying to tackle this initiative that is in the office of the NGF instead of the NGF. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Ochoba. Let me tell you the secret. Yes. Every civil servant from the minister to the assistant director is afraid of the new media.
He's afraid of
the new media? Yes. Social media.
Why should
So let me share my experience with you. I had to do a presentation, a joint presentation with the ministries. I wrote letters to the ministers. They minister to the PAMSEC to director to assistant directors. So things were moving fine. A day before my presentation, one assistant director called me and said, "Patrick, the presentation is not going to hold." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, he started giving me a story. Let me not share the story. I was supposed to have the presentation on Tuesday. So Monday morning, I took a first flight. I was in Abuja. I went to the director's office. Before coming to Abuja, I wrote my petitions against him, against the director, which was supposed to coordinate my presentation. I got into his office as early as 8 o'clock. He wasn't around. I waited for him to come. When he came, I submitted my letter to his PA. The PA read through the letters and said, "Okay, this letter, why are you submitting this kind of letter?" I said, "This letter is a protest against the assistant director." The PA said, "No. Okay, please let me have a meeting. Let us resolve this matter with the assistant director before he goes to the director, because this could lead or sack the assistant director." I told him, "No, I don't have any problem with the assistant director. That my problem is with the director, who is the boss. That this letter must get to the boss." In my letter, I told the director, my presentation tomorrow must hold. It's a mandate. Yes. I told the director to be specific, because we need to, in this country, we need to talk and nail the emphasis. That was the director of Information and Communication Technology in the Federal Ministry of Education. I told him this presentation tomorrow must hold, and if it doesn't hold, I will involve the new media. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Yes, it must hold tomorrow." He said, "But you didn't get approval from the director of social services and all." I said, "I got all those approvals." So I sat down in his office. I was reading my newspapers, but let me tell you, within 2 hours, they gave me approval for my presentation. They said I should go on with my presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So all of us here must be activists in this country.
Thank you.
You face the problem, you confront the problem, you challenge the problem before we can solve it.
Thank you.
Can I just pick up on, can I just one second? I just wanted to pick up on his point about social media, and I wanted to put this to some of the other panelists. If you could you tell us how powerful a tool is social media and other forms of media in your work?
That most times you have government officials that actually are afraid of social media. Because they are realizing the power of social media. And I would use an example of one of our movement, the Not Too Young to Run movement, and how the social media was very instrumental in making it a national and global movement. And what we had to do was basically to get young people interested in youth participation and the value it adds to governance, and then pushing that out and letting them take the move. So even when we were engaging the lawmakers, at the point where we got intel that our bill was the bill to reduce the age to run for office and was not going to be considered, we immediately started mobilizing on social media and even started tweeting at handles of some of the lawmakers and sharing their numbers so that people start calling them, which became an issue because I know at one point the deputy Senate president said, "Oh, you're not threatening us, young people. You think you put us at, you think you'd threaten us and you make us do what you want us." And we said, "Sir, sorry, we are not here to threaten you. We want the Constitution amended to reduce the age for more young people to run for office. And we want to ensure our bill is considered on the floor of the House, both the Senate and House of Reps. And we would go through every possible means to ensure you listen to us. So we would tweet your numbers, we put it on Facebook, we would ask people to call you and send you 1,000 messages if that is possible. And we would do that. So we've seen the importance of that. And I think government needs to start appreciating what they can actually benefit from social media engagement and interaction, because we can no longer do governance the way it used to be in the military era, where everything was closed. I know a conversation was made on the FOI. We've done a lot of FOIs. It's one of the most difficult things to do. MDAs do not respond to FOI requests. For sometimes we have to go to court to ask for an order of mandamus. Most times they even don't show up in court. The Servicom, during my youth service days, I was posted to the Servicom unit in Human Rights Commission. I went in with so much zeal, I read a lot about it. And I got in there and I realized Servicom was just a unit who just come to work and go. Nothing was done to complaints made then to the Human Rights Commission, human rights violation complaints. So these to me were personal, these were not issues to just throw aside. So what the question is, do our governments, do they understand the importance of making the existing institutions work to meet the needs of the people first? And then stop looking at social media as something to be afraid of, but rather engage. You are in government to serve the people. It's a shame that when we go to interact with our constituency dialogues that we have with constituents, we started that after 2015 to get lawmakers to have town hall meetings with our constituents. Most of them refused to do that. It did not make sense. They voted you, and now come and engage your constituents. You write to them, you invite them. We're not even asking you to pay. We would provide for the venue, we would get buses to bring your constituents to the venue. Just show up. It became a problem. We just had a few of them that agreed to turn out. And we saw constituents coming to ask questions. So even at that point of engaging the citizens at the local level, it becomes a huge challenge. And then when you ask them, oh, let's even have a tweet chat. We want to engage an issue. Let's have a tweet chat on that. We would ask questions. People can ask you questions. You'd even hardly get responses. So the problem is not that the people are not educated or do not even know their rights. We may not know how to quote sections of the constitutions, those that are not lawyers, but they know that when they wake up, it's good to see power, it's good to be able to feed yourself, and they know what they are entitled to. But the thing is, if the government has no intention to restore faith of the people in government, and then all they do is come out with new initiative, it would never work, because what we have existing is yet to meet the needs. And until we restore faith of the people in the government, we will still not be achieving any result. But engaging the people is critical. The social media is a good platform. I don't know the idea, the fear or the threat. There's nothing wrong in talking to the people and responding to questions. That is why you're in government. You're representing the people. And the moment you're afraid of the people, it means you're obviously not serving the people in government.
Yeah, thank you. Just to make the point again, thank you very much. Just to make the point again, please, we have so many people who want to ask questions. Please, let's keep it brief. Question, 20 seconds maximum. Comment, 30 seconds. So we can get to as many people as possible. We just have a few more minutes to go.
Thank you very much. My name is Suleiman Andanusa. As a citizen in Nigeria, one of the very basic interface I would like to have with government is when I'm in danger, there is a number like 911 nationally that I can pick and call, and I get immediate response. We don't have that when we're building portals. Some of us have to know every DPO in our area to get a direct line. Can we solve that problem? Because it's very basic. Even the so-called reference can call the 911 line and get sent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from a lady. Let's hear from a lady, please. Thank you.
Good morning, I'll be brief. My name is Oleka Adam Marshall. I just want to follow up on the question that Yemi asked that I don't think has been answered, and Mason also referred to. Yemi said, was this really designed to work? And Mason then said to you to actually say, just give an example of an outcome or result that has been achieved. So my question is, just very briefly, what exactly was the intention of this program? Because you said that you are discussing things within a particular context. I think with me, at least, there's a disconnect. Because I don't understand what the result and outcomes are meant to be. So I really can't understand the context in which you're talking to us. Thank you.
Now, let me address that. I think let's not mix apples and oranges. When she asked the question and said, was this designed to work? Absolutely. It wasn't designed to be kept. Can I, please? Now, it is out there, the portal is open, and it is left to Nigerians to engage. And then let me also say that, look, I am one of those that honestly thinks we need more engagement with the citizenry. We must try to bridge that gap. But the civil society organizations and NGOs, name them whatever you want, oftentimes they work at reaching out to government. But if you look at most of what we receive, and I'm saying this by virtue of experience, I have them there on my table severally, they come to you one thing or the other, oftentimes either partnership for funding, collaboration for funding on this or that. Hardly do we receive from these civil society organizations the kind of requests that will lead to some valuable engagement. The truth of the matter is that I think even within the civil society sector, we need to also talk to ourselves on how to engage government and the need to better do that. Government will not come to you and say, come to me and collect this. Government is doing its best. We have opened the portal. The portal is available. The website is there. Then we will, of course, try to market it like we have tried to advertise. But we need the citizenry to engage. So when you talk about, was it designed to work? Absolutely. And that is why virtually every ministry, department, and agency of government for the past 3 years or more had one form of e-government activity or the other. Diverse people have been trained. We entered into partnership with the Korean government, who were training people for free, even taking some outside to to Korea to train on e-participation and what have you. The whole of that was done such that we will be able to have nodal officers in the various ministries, departments, and agencies of government to be able to deal with these issues when such comes from the citizenry. So yes, in direct answer, it was designed to work, and we're not giving up on it. The best we can do is the ideas that are coming up on this platform now on how to better push that, such that it becomes more beneficial to us as Nigerians. So I think we should also look at, what we're discussing, the citizen participation. We are not here to try to defend what government is doing or not doing, but rather is the space adequately or is there effective provisions for us to participate? And we say, look, we may not be where we want to be, but we're not where we were, because this is being put in place to further create room for engagement. But if the citizenry do not take advantage, how do we even know?
Okay, so let's take some more questions from the audience now. Thank you.
Hello? Okay, my name is Luku, and I just wanted to give a little advice. Through what I do, I'm privileged to be in various fora where internationally and locally where things, discussions about Nigeria have gone up. And what
Gabriel.
And this thing will go on and on and on. When we talk of 2010, 2020, 2030, and all that, is there any way as a government that we can lower our voices about corruption and say something else? Thank you,
sir.
I know this is not a very good time to discuss that because the elections are on. Everybody wants to see the elections are on. They will look for corruption and do that.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I think Yemi should probably answer this question. Ms. Yemi, do you have anything to say? Considering what he just said, that we should lower our tone on corruption. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
He said government should lower their tone about corruption. I won't speak for government.
Yeah, but as a citizen, I would like to say that we should speak more about corruption. We are actually not speaking enough about corruption. And that is where we are also struggling with it at the moment. I knew in the past, they have used different other adjectives to describe it. Some call it leakages. There are a lot of leakages that needs to be blocked. It doesn't speak to the reality of the issues and the challenges we're experiencing. Look, I don't really think that, I hear people say, oh, because you are talking about corruption too much, no foreign investor will come here. Look, investors define their interests, they know what they want, and they will come once the environment is okay for them to come. We are not the worst or the most corrupt country in the world, despite all the ratings, but there are investors in even war-torn countries. We have investors in Afghanistan, there are investors in Iraq, there are investors everywhere. So the issue is, we have a problem. We have a problem and we must deal with that problem. That's the honest thing. We actually want the government to do more than it is currently doing on the issues of corruption. They're not doing enough. You are business people. I work in the civil society. I know how corruption is undermining practically everything. And I agree with the Vice President here yesterday that he said corruption is a major bane of our development. And we must accept that. You can't have roads, you can't have electricity, you can't have anything because some individuals are plundering our collective resources and pocketing them. Go around our street in Abuja here. You have corruption working naked. Corruption is on the street, naked. The kind of houses you have, the kind of cars you have on the street, public servants owing things that their salaries cannot buy, is naked corruption. It's outright irresponsibility for us to actually say we can't have more corruption. We should talk about it and we should deal with it.
Hello. Yes, my name is Judith Isaac, and I just have a very brief comment. The government official has been speaking a lot about engagement and the citizens being very skeptical about engaging, for lack of a better term. My comment is just very brief, like I said earlier. In order to get people to engage, you have to first listen. So I think a lot of conversation in this room has gone on as to how to get people to engage, why people are not engaging. I think the government should take a role of stepping back and listening to the people, to the voices around them. I don't think it's brain science or very difficult to find out the problems in Nigerians. The problem is that people don't feel like they're being heard, they're being listened to. So I think rather than being defensive, maybe we should just try to listen to each other more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have questions for the other panelists? Please.
It's okay. Yeah? We are fine.
Yeah. To the other panelists? Yes? Are you sure? Please. Very brief, but please direct it to the other three.
No! They don't have to direct it. They don't have to.
My name is Agatha, representing Workforce. I'd like to say something about corruption. I don't think talking about corruption is the way forward. There's a difference between talking about corruption and addressing corruption. We talk about corruption, we market our country. We address corruption, we market our country. I don't think investors should just come knowing that, okay, we have things there, they want to invest in, but there's corruption in the country. I think we need to address
corruption and not to talk about corruption. Thank you very much. Let me go to the other side of the room because it looks like I've been on one side for a long time. Okay, another lady, then I'll come to you. Just give me a minute.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruth. So, to the other people, I would not like to address this one right now. So, I want you to please, because I feel that the government did not answer the question about the outcome, and I would like for any other person on the panel to please give us an example of an outcome from any of your projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have him?
So, okay. Cynthia gave one already, talking about the Not Too Young to Run movement and how a bill became an act, and you now actually have young people who are running in the 2019 elections because the act made that possible. On our end, I would like to give one that's actually not government related, but it's tied to one of the electricity discos in Lagos, who continuously gave a community estimated bills, and the community engaged them continuously on getting prepaid meters. They refused to do it, so what the community did every month was to compile their estimated bills and write them a cover letter, that these bills are outrageous and we will not pay them until you give us a prepaid meter. They did that over a sequence of over months, tried to get the disco to come in for a meeting, and they declined. So we got them on our radio program, and they spoke about it. The disco called them the day after and went in to have a meeting. So the outcome was that they negotiated their bill and reduced it based on what the community thought was fair. We don't have light, so why would you give us this outrageous bill? And the second bit was that the disco is then working, sort of prioritize them on the list of people to get prepaid meters.
One of our engagement then, I don't know if you follow the story of the NIS Stampede some years ago, where the Immigration Service conducted an recruitment exercise, and young people at the stadium, there was a stampede and we lost some of them. And we took that up as an engagement, and we went to both the NIS, the Interior Federal Ministry of Internal Affairs, and we had a lot of pushback because they didn't want to even acknowledge that there was a problem, because they had first blamed the young people for being orderly and thus leading to the stampede, and basically blaming young people for dying at the recruitment exercise. That was just a shoddy episode of our history. But the thing is, by the time we went on radio, we went on social media, we wrote letters, and we identified some of the victims that had injuries, and some of them were in hospitals. We went out, we reached out to them and asked if they would support the claim we are pushing for government to address that. We actually had some of them who were willing to go to court. And with that engagement, towards 2015, the general elections, we decided to make it an issue for campaign also, to say if you don't even address these issues, young people wouldn't vote for you, because what kind of government would conduct interviews and people die, and you don't address that. And I know in court, we were attacked as just being juvenile, youthful, that this was youthful exuberance. But towards early 2015, we got payments and settlements made, hospital bills paid for for those that sustained injuries, and even for families of the victims, they got some compensation, because for those that died, their families, they got some compensation. So that for us was a huge outcome. And then I think one would always want to sell is a Not Too Young to Run, because this was the first time young people were pushing to amend the Constitution, which is very rigid, because we needed one two-thirds majority in the National Assembly at the state level. And we got a lot of pushback at first. It took us 2 years. This was not the first time we were pushing for reduction of age. But this time around, we achieved success. And now, for 2019, we have a 26-year-old lady in Kano who is running for the House of Assembly. We have 25-year-olds who are running for the House of Assembly and the House of Representatives. We have a lot of under 30-year-olds running for election in 2019. And that for us is huge success, because if we didn't have the Constitution amended to reduce the age, we wouldn't have young people actually indicate interest, start engaging the political space, days and actually aspiring to run for office and winning their primaries, which was very tedious for some of them, because this was the first experience they were having in politics.
I run one of the most ambitious girl child education program in northern Nigeria, working with both the state government, communities, and traditional institutions in strengthening and promoting girl child education. It's one of the huge challenges of development in the northern part of the country, particularly northwest and the northeast. And whole thing is attached to poverty, attached to religion, attached to cultural belief or misinterpretations of religious doctrines and all that. It took a while, but today we count the numbers and we are seeing tremendous gains that we're making on these issues. And that for me is a major, major issue, believing that once we get our girls and young people educated, we'll be taking this country to another level. I was very happy yesterday when I heard the Vice President emphasizing on the need to educate girls, and for me, that's a major issue. The second one was before the last elections, I was also ran a community accountability program with some of our communities where we got the communities to set up their development plans and demands for politicians, so that each politician that comes to the community for campaigns, they don't just wait for the person to tell them what he is going to do. They engage the politician by saying, this is what we want you to do. So you don't go there and climb the rostrum and campaign. They present it to you, you sign, you accept it, that you have agreed that you are going to support the communities in providing these facilities. 6 months after winning the elections, they begin to engage you on how far you have gone. And today it is causing a lot of issues because the same people are returning and the communities are asking questions and rating them based on what they have done and what they promised during the previous elections. So a lot of engagement is taking place at community level.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so can we just take a couple of questions from the audience before we sum up?
Yes, so I have a question myself. And for me, what do you think is the thing that needs to be done? Because everyone's been talking about the portal, what is it for? It's not meant to work. But what do you think? He's here now, so give him some feedback. What do they need to do to make that portal work? Because it's already in existence.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Gabriel, we'll talk like colleagues. The truth of the matter is that in government, the public service, we still regard development, strategic communication, citizens engagement, stakeholder management as stuff that can be handled with common sense. And largely because we are compartmentalized into cadres, we have information officers who rarely take responsibility for such communication. And what has come from this conversation is that these core competencies must be built in the public service. We cannot afford not to. So we need to make it, even if it's not specialized training, virtually every public servant needs to be trained to communicate, to engage stakeholders, and of course also to learn social media engagement. And my take is something as basic and common as an engagement program. You cannot afford to launch, as is commonly said, you cannot shave the head of a person in his or her absence without involving civil society and the target group in the design. And in doing that, you will have tapped from their competencies, you will have tapped from their methodologies, you will have tapped from their learning in order to be able to give direction. And the last thing I want to say is that if you design a program of communication and engagement and it's not working,
the government tell you it's working, it's not working. I've tried to use it myself.
even as a governor, when the previous government tried to do something, and after that, nobody answered me. It's not working. So we just say it's not working. Number two is that I'd like what the last comment from the last speaker said, issue of, we need to, when we're designing the policy, to actually make it a demand issue, not supply issue, as it is today. That's where you have to start. But this is a situation where the citizens don't even know what the government is doing. So they don't even know what to ask them. I was surprised when you said people were campaigning and people were telling them what to do. I wish that can happen because we don't even see them. I have run campaign and I know that for me, all I'll appeal to all of us here is that the government is not working today. It didn't work in the past. Don't think it was working when I was there. It didn't work in the past. And it's not working today. I have served, and I can tell you, government is far apart from the people. What we need to do is, and make pleading with all of you, is to actually see that we have no other country except this one, and engage them. As a governor for 8 years, I hardly see people who tell me I'm doing the wrong thing. Everybody tells me you are super. Since you came, the world has changed. And that is the problem. Nobody tells you anything. I use this example whenever I have opportunity. It took an 11-year-old child in school to courageously tell me that I don't keep to my promise. Because I went to their school to say something, and I came back. She asked a question, Governor, why don't you didn't keep your promise? No other person did. But I'm telling you, they don't keep their promise, and we must engage them. On issue of corruption, yes, I agree with you. I'm not saying people shouldn't shout about corruption, but let's start dealing with it. Let's work on it. What you do when you have a situation where there's leakage or anything is to first stop it from escalating. But here we move from 36 to 48, and it doesn't matter. It matters because it's worsening by the day. And we see it every day. People are actually celebrating the corruption every day. I see it as I walk around every day. Like you said, let's stop saying, oh, we can't be part of this. We can't be part of this. I have somebody who has just invited me in an occasion that is coming in 2 weeks' time, and it's supposed to be an occasion to celebrate his new building and everything, which I know is product of corruption. And people will be there with him. Pastors will be praying for God to give him more. Those will be laughing and everything. And I know it's corrupt money. That's where we have to start. So, for me, it's not working. Let's deal with our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry I can't take any more questions, but it means that for this summit next year, we'll probably ask for 3 hours or 4 hours because I can still see a lot of hands up. So it's unfortunate that our time is up, but thank you so much for participating because as someone, I remember the hashtags. I have a lot of respect for everybody on this platform, especially EIE, the media rights, everybody. I have a lot of respect for them because they started conversations that a lot of us were afraid to start. And I remember a few years ago, I think it was in 2002, I was thoroughly, when I mean thoroughly, I mean I was thoroughly beaten by mobile policemen. And then in 2006, my friends and I were almost killed by uniformed policemen. And when the NSAS started, it made me realize the importance of participation because when it happened, I did nothing. I went, I licked my wounds. My friend that was shot, they took us to the hospital, they never came back. But they started the conversation, so thank you all very much. A big round of applause for them, please. And yesterday, it was the Senate President who says that we must all participate. There is no other option. Every single person must join this war. So if we don't do that, there are young people watching us on YouTube. So those people are listening. Thank you for participating. Now they've seen people asking pertinent questions, making those comments. Is absolutely brilliant. Please, a round of applause to yourselves for participating and for being examples, good examples. So when we leave here today, please let us continue. The election is coming. Pick a candidate, know about that candidate, him or her, and go out and vote. Get your voter's card. Let us all get involved. And beyond that as well, let us get involved. Even if it's not late, because there are people who have their cards that won't go out because they believe they won't make a difference. But we can. People say votes are bought. If our votes don't count, why do they pay for those votes? It means they count, or they wouldn't give us 1,000 naira to vote. So please, let's get involved. Now I'll hand over to Ijoma. And Ijoma, I hope that now we've been talking about all the problems. Now we need to hear about solutions.
Why are you ashamed?
Those plans that we need to embark on at this time, the action plans that we need. So thank you very much, everybody. That's my time.
We're just going to tap into our panelists' expertise, people who've actually been able to affect change. And so we want to leave you all with ideas of things that you can do to make change happen as well. So we'll just start with Cynthia. If you can just talk about what you actually did to actually have a dialogue with the government in such a way that you were able to change the constitution.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the things we did with Not Too Young to Run was to build it as a movement. So the first time we moved a motion to we pushed for the reduction of age was in 2009. And I remember we were before the Senate and House Committee on Constitution Review. And they asked us, so you want young people to run for office? We said yes. And that lawmaker literally just laughed and said, Nigeria does not have time for young people. Things don't change that fast. And then we said, but distinguished, we need to open up the space. And he said this wouldn't happen. So it wasn't even addressed at the floor of the House. In 2012, we also pushed for the reduction of age. We pushed for independent candidacy and some other rights. That did not also see the light of day in the constitutional amendment process. And post-2015, we did an analysis of young people who were running for office and found out that we had young people who were actually running, but who were not eligible. Even if they won the elections, they wouldn't be sworn in because it could be challenged in court. So we identified lawmakers that we felt to champion that, but then we went to the people. Because one, we didn't want to just act as lawyers anymore. We wanted citizens to care about that, young people to care about that. So we built a movement around organizing for youth inclusion in Nigeria. And one of the things we did was to have every engagement at local government, state level, and in the Federal Capital Territory. So you had youth organizers who were trained specifically on organizing and movement building, and they were going to communities to get young people to meet their lawmakers at the State Assembly, the Senate, and the House of Representatives to care about this bill. We got to the point of threat, sending text messages. If you don't vote for this bill, we won't vote you in office. We have the power, and we want you to vote for this bill. So we built a movement. We had some street actions, because at some point we needed to go to the street to march National Assembly to get the demand. And it took us 2 years, 2016. The bill was finally, it got presidential assent in May this year. And to achieve that, because when it got to the point of assent, we were not sure if the president would sign. So we had a press conference and said, give Nigerians a democracy they gift. If you care about young people and say you have youth development as an issue, sign this bill into law. And we got that signed into law. So that showed that, one, a movement that is led by the people beyond just what we did in 2009 and 2012. 2016, we changed the engagement, and we got young people, we educated them on the Constitution Amendment bills. We taught them new ways to engage. We gave them opportunities to take ownership. So one, engagement must be driven by the people. The people must take ownership. They must care about it, and they must believe in it. And we don't come from a point of savior. We come from a point of we have an issue, and we can address that together. And trust me, people care about things, because Nigerian youth took it up like their own personal initiative, and we didn't have to go to the states to engage. They did that, and we got over 30 states as Houses of Assembly to sign to assent to this bill. The other is on elections. I think if we look at INEC itself, because we've worked with INEC over the past years, INEC of 2007 is not INEC of today. We have an institution that's actually engaging people more. An electoral process, whether we like it or not, is getting better. Now, what are some of the things we've seen in the electoral process? One, let me start with disability. And once upon a time, we did not have data of persons with disability, but with the new CVR, with the engagement from the disability groups to start capturing persons with disability, with the new CVR, that is also being captured. Even on the point of voting, there is now a column where they take notes of persons with disability, what disability, and even sex disaggregation. We had complained to INEC in 2015 that we did not have youth disaggregation based sex, youth, and even occupation. And post-2015, INEC could actually share data with us, made it public, on how many persons who were accredited to vote were young people, and their occupation, and how many of them were women, how many were men. So that is also what we achieved with engaging INEC and pushing for issues. The card reader, I think we need to appreciate citizens' engagement on how the card reader has become part of our electoral process, and even more deployment of technology. So now you see Ekiti and Osun. We had the issue of vote buying, for instance. And one of the things we had advocated after Osun was people sell their votes by taking pictures and giving to political parties to get paid. And if you notice in Osun, INEC actually listened to civil society engagement and said, oh, you can take your phone to the polling unit, but at the point of voting, you can't go into your vote. So in Osun, we may have had vote buying, but it was very strategic because politicians, if you work to improve the system, they look for new ways to manipulate it. So that is still a challenge. But we had lesser cases of people snapping pictures and going to receive money at the polling unit. So that reduced the notion. So I think with more engagement, we've seen more institutions becoming open. And I think INEC is one of those institutions that has become much better than it was pre-2015 and even after 2015 general elections.
Okay, I just want to...
So I think the message from Cynthia is that, look, engagement is taking place across board. Yes, it can be challenging at the beginning, but ultimately, if you remain committed, you get the result. And that was what happened with the Freedom of Information Law. Basically, it took about 10 years to get that through. We went through different kinds of frustrations. The bill suffered about 3 times and had to get reactivated. I remember the first time we met President Obasanjo on this, it was on a gathering like that, and we had a conversation around it. His first message was that, look, this thing will not pass. He was very clear. And he told us that, look, you cannot just go and bring a bill from another country and expect that I will sit here and just sign it. What about our national security? As far as he was concerned at that time, this particular bill is not Nigerian. And Nigeria is not ready and prepared to have that bill. I remember as part of our engagement, I was leading the intervention in the northwest of the country. And then we had a dinner with senators, northwest senators in Kaduna, as part of the process of lobbying. We had the conversation, did the presentation of the Freedom of Information, called them to please support this and all that. At the end, Senator Arua, I will never forget, he called me aside and said, Doctor, then spoke in Hausa. And he said, look, do you guys, you have to be careful. These white people should not be giving you money and then you bring all their idea and you expect it. This is a senator that I engaged, had a conversation with, actually took our dinner. But at the end of the day, what he could tell me was that, look, I'm being used by somebody because as far as he's concerned, that particular bill was useless for Nigeria. It's not going to work for the country. But we went. At the end of the day, the face of passing this bill was very dramatic. It was dramatic. It came up just within 48 hours, and it went for presidential assent. So what that means for us is that engagement is taking place. We require a certain level of consistency. Keep demanding. There are frustrations will take place. Some people will dismiss you. Some will actually call you names. But if you believe in this, you will get it through. Thank you.
You guys spoke about the not too young
to run bill, and basically the engagement with National Assembly members. And part of it is really what's in it for me. All of you will have gotten a key ring that says Office of the Citizen. At the heart of it is really, as the gentleman at the back said, a social contract between citizens and government. And it is a demand and supply game. If you demand nothing, they will supply rubbish. So I really want us, as the educated elite in this room, we are 1%, okay, of Nigeria's population. We have access. And quite honestly, we have options. And we really need to think honestly about how much more do we want to insulate ourselves from poor governance, and how that affects us across the board, from healthcare. No matter how rich you are, if something happens to you in certain places, it's not, your wealth will not get you out of the country for healthcare. You need literally a hospital that they can drive you to, so your life will be saved. Education. A lot of the people in this room, you run businesses. The current educational structure in Nigeria cannot produce the kind of people we need to run our businesses in the future. And if we don't start correcting it now, I'm sure you guys have horror stories for days of CVs and people you've met and interviewed. But it's a fundamental issue. Security. Your car can only be so tinted or so bulletproof. Your gate can only, or your fence can only be so high, unless you want to stay home all day. But even then, so we really need to think about it, even if it's for simple, enlightened self-interest. We must ensure that governance works. We teach something that those of us who have access, and I say us, Mr. Obi was saying them, it's politicians, us. Engage us, not them. Engage us, engage him. Those of us who have access, think of yourself as a thumb. Your thumb is your only finger that can touch your other fingers easily. Your other fingers will touch, but they will struggle. But your thumb touches easily. Think of yourself as a thumb, and think of who is it do I have influence over, that I can educate, that I can engage, that I can get them to see how this, all connected, affects the quality of life and the substance of their lives. We also have the clout, in a sense, and the access to engage politicians to ensure that what is being offered and what is being seen as a vision for Nigeria is something that they plan to deliver or can deliver. Support the people who you know can actually deliver, not people who make promises and then don't deliver. Vote buying, Cynthia spoke about it, and it really is tied to poor governance. Yes, there are the tricks of the way it's done, the phone and all of that, but ultimately, if you haven't paid salaries for 1 year, and you say that Nigeria has the highest number of people who are poor in the world, people will sell their votes. It's not any intellectual conversation. They will sell their votes. And for all of us in this room, our votes are also for sale. It's just that our price points are slightly different. And it might not be transactional. My price point might be a manifesto that focuses on education and health. I will sell it to a candidate that offers me that. I've sold my vote for that. But we're talking about vote buying in the context of it being transactional. And it will be transactional when people are illiterate and they are poor. And unless we have that conversation, any other intellectual conversation about why are people selling their votes is a bloody waste of time. And lastly, support CSOs. Mr. Abdul referred to it. A lot of us do the work that we do funded by foreign individuals and foreign nations, not by Nigerians. Yet we're working to make Nigeria a better place. And we will speak and we will talk about the issues and the challenges, but we will not be willing to put our money where our mouth is. Let's think about it. So from, again, a very simple, enlightened self-interest perspective, activate your office of the citizen, and even from a very selfish perspective, do something.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's actually very difficult for you to speak from the perspective of government and not sound defensive. But I must say in all that this session has been extremely valuable feedback for us in government. Because yes, we have tried to make efforts, but now we've been able to, in this session, actually highlight the lapses and what we think should be done. I'll take this feedback back to perhaps we'll go back to the drawing board, but I also want to appeal that the citizens actually try more to engage with government such that we can see how to move this whole entity called Nigeria forward. One of the things that has been very consistent in what the three speakers have said is the consistency. The FOI took about 11 to 12 years before it was passed into law. If the team had not been consistent, we wouldn't have seen it. We also need some level of engagement in virtually every sector of government. And we will appreciate that level of consistency to work with the citizenry, because the truth of the matter is that not only those in government don't know everything. Some of you are able to come up with knowledge that we don't even have idea exists. But if we have a platform that helps us to effectively work together and not get tired along the line and be consistent like they were, I believe that we'll be able to impact in more of these spaces. But for today, I want to thank everyone that has contributed. I have taken notes copiously, and we will go back and see what we can be done. What we can do and can be done generally in the government circles to better this platform for engagement. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and we thank the panelists for their insights.
Let's appreciate them. I think this session has been absolutely very unique. Let's appreciate them. Thank you. It generated enough heat to warm up the environment with the AC and enough light for us to be able to see the future. We want to thank you for this. I don't know, where are the photographers? Okay, please. I can't see the chairman now. Maybe a few members of the board that are here can rise and join us. Please. Mr. Felicia Phillips, Mr. Frank Aigbogun, you can join the panel here in the absence of the chairman for the group photograph.